by a current prisoner. This is your favorite journalist, Tony, giving you an inside dive inside the minds, man, of California's incarcerated. Man, I can sense it. I can sense it that some of you out there are struggling. I can sense it that some of you out there are going through some emotional and psychological pain, man. I can sense it. Man, don't even trip, man. Days will get better. You know what I'm saying? These days will pass, man. I know it must be hard, man. I know a lot of you guys are hitting rock bottom. Me, myself, I've hit rock bottom several times. Man, but, man, through the strength of God, man, and everything else, man, I've always been able to find myself climbing out of that trench, man, and brighter days are to come. So with that being said, man, don't give up. Don't give up. Stay strong. And keep your head up like you got a nosebleed, man. And stay strong, man. These dark days will pass, okay? I promise you that, man. And for those of you that are doubting yourself on trying to take that next step on opening up a business or going back to school and you're doubting yourself, stop doubting yourself. Believe in yourself. I believe in you. Your boy Tony believes in you, man. If the whole world doubts you, man, don't even trip. Your boy Tony believes in you. I believe in myself. And that's all that matters, man. Let's go. Let's roll.
All right, Mr. Jason, sir, are you ready, sir?
All right, man.
Okay, Mr. Jason, sir, you are good to go, sir. Go ahead and shine bright, the way you always do, man.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tony. Yeah, check this out. So this is one of my very first introductions to P9, which is a Southern California white supremacist gang out here in California that has been well recognized, and it ended up being one of the most notorious, aggressive white supremacist gangs there are, period. And, the difference between this gang and other gangs is the direction that it was headed. And a lot of people, they didn't necessarily know whether or not it was a street gang or a prison gang, just based on the way, that we got tipped up. And the fact of the matter is, man, I grew up all around Southern California, all around P9, and I used to hear it. I used to hear the name at, P9 did this at this party, P9 did that at that party, and that's usually where the violence that's where it would happen at. It would be at some local concert, some local barbecue, some local, kickback or party. Everything would be going good, and then as it gets later, as more alcohol and drugs start to settle in, then P9 shows up, and then all hell breaks loose, and next thing you know, there's a bunch of bodies that are stabbed up or shot, and P9's responsible for them. And
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
They thrived on violence. That was the notion. That was what we were meant for. That was how we got our power and our control, was through violence. And the crazy thing about P9 is every single actual member from P9, 100% was always trying to outdo the next member. And every member was an individual. Every member from P9 was an individual. Every member from P9 had their own little wrecking crew. They had their own little influence. They were all leaders of some sort, all wrapped up underneath of the title P9, Public Enemy Number 1, Death Squad. And for me, I grew up around it. And there was a little crew called FTW, out where I stayed at in Southern California, and it was called The World. That was the name of it. It was a little white supremacist gang out there in Menifee, Lake Elsinore, Temecula, Corona area, Riverside area, that were going around just thrashing people, wreaking havoc around the area, making a name for themselves. And they ended up getting in trouble, got caught for this court case. They all went to CYA, California Youth Authority, and every single individual ended up becoming a P9 member, because that right there was our aspirations, was to become one. Because once you can become a P9 member, then you're a big homie. You're reaping all benefits from it. Now, I remember one day I went over to one of my buddies' houses right there in Menifee. At this time, the war between P9, skinheads, and the Vagos, we were going at it, but we were mashing on the Vagos. We were making these guys beg for mercy, period, okay? We were wreaking terror that they had never seen before. And we were high on amphetamine, pumping steroids through our blood, and we were not caring, and we were running around with assault rifles and not caring about nothing. And at this particular time, too, there was just a lot going on with the skinhead movement, and they ended up doing a big sweep out there where I stay, and they took a lot of skinheads off the streets. They took a lot of Kenai skinheads off the streets. They did a white supremacist sweep out there because of what was going on, the violence that we were doing, and everything else that came with it, from the chop shops to the illegal assault rifles with illegal drums and suppressors and silencers. I mean, we're out there really doing it. I'm in jail right now. I'm in prison right now for attempted murder for 27 years for shooting somebody. I've done it several times. I've done it, without hesitation. And to me, it ended up becoming a profession. It ended up turning into a profession of mine. But so this day, I go over to my homeboy's house. His mom manufactures. Okay, but at this time, she didn't have all the ingredients to manufacture this. So she was getting it from a personal friend of hers who lived in the next city nearby, and that city is called Quail Valley. Quail Valley is just this little rundown tweaker town where almost every single house either cooks dope, does dope, sells dope. It's one of the three. I mean, that's what's going on there, and it's a really, really horrible town to live in. You wouldn't want to raise your kids there. And so she had a personal friend right there that used to manufacture, and if she wasn't manufacturing, then she was plugged in with one of the local Southerner gangs right there, and she had endless amounts of money. And back then, it was a little bit different. This was back in 2004, 2005, where was a lot more expensive than it is now, okay? So, but this was the real good stuff that had you amped up doing stuff that you probably normally wouldn't do. So, as I come over into this house, when I walk in, usually I'm greeted and I'm embraced, and we're all hugs and everything's great. But when I walked in this day, everything just seemed down. And I seen the long faces, and I'm like, bro, what's going on here? What's going on? Why is she crying, and why is her friend crying? And one of my friends, one of my bros, he looks over at me and he says, hey, man, such and such an individual just jacked them of all their methamphetamine and all their money. And I said, what? And I asked him who it was. My friend, my personal friend who was telling me this, his name was Sean Ritchie. Sean Ritchie, okay? And that's the only name that I'll mention right here because he didn't really have much of a role in any of this. But he looks over at me and he tells me, such and such jacked him. And I said, well, I know such and such. I know this person, and we'll just say John Doe. So I know John Doe real well. And the thing that I know about this John Doe is that he rolls strapped. And he's a part of this big white supremacist movement just as much as I am, maybe even a little bit more, because this is one of my very first introductions of when I was actually inside a house full of Kenai members and got to experience it for the first time and what it was really like to be among them. So I say, well, why don't we just go get their stuff back? And Sean Ritchie looks at me and he tells me, he says, hey, bro, it's not going to be that simple because he's staying over at Pusher from Kenai, his compound. Now, Pusher from Kenai is on death row. He's on death row for a crime that put him over on the SNY side because he got so spun out, him and another individual, they got so spun out, they did something to somebody that they shouldn't have done. They dismembered the body, threw it in a barrel, and chucked it off the Ortega Highway right there in Lake Elsinore, and they got caught for it. So they were so spun out, man, they thought that this girl was wearing a wire, which she wasn't. They thought that she had a wire inside of her body, so they dismembered her body, and they got caught for it. Therefore, you're no longer Kenai. Therefore, you're in trouble, okay? But that's what they were on death row for. And this is Jeff Buettner, Pusher from Kenai. So they say that John Doe is over living at Pusher's compound in the back of it in a 13-foot trailer. And I go, okay, well, let's just go on over there. And they say, you're crazy. You're crazy. How are we going to go over there? I said, we're going to go over there because I'm just as crazy. And I'm going to go over there and we're going to get your stuff back. I promise you right now. Don't you worry about it. We're going to get your stuff back one way or another. That's going to happen. I said, check this out. Me, Sean Ritchie, and that girl from Quail Valley, we're going to take her car and we're going to go over to this compound and we're going to get this stuff back. I had a 9mm Beretta with no jam action. This 9mm Beretta was with 16 shots, one in the chamber, 16 shots in the clip, one in the chamber. It does not jam, and I can push that trigger as many times as possible, and I had it on me. It was a wood grain handle, all chrome. Chrome with a wood grain handle. I have it fully loaded, and I tell Sean Ritchie and that girl, let's go. As we're driving over to Pusher's compound, they're getting real nervous. And I say, check this out. I want you to park down the street, and we're going to walk up there. And as we're going there, and as we're inside there, inside Pusher's compound, if you hear any type of gunshots, I want you to flee from the scene. That's what I want you to do. I want you to save yourself, and I want you to flee from the scene. And she's like, okay. I said, all right, are we understood? Are we under an agreement? She said, yes. So we're all under full agreement, and now we're pulling up. And I tell her to park right here, which is about a block away from Pusher's compound. And she turns her keys off. I said, don't turn your key off. Keep it idle. Keep your car running idle. I'm going to try to make this quick. We're going to run up in there, and we're going to run out. Okay? I don't know how many people are in there at this time because you never know. This is a penile compound, and people hang out there at all times. Okay? You have like Dave Messina. You have Tawley. You have Ryan Ramiro. You have Jason Mahoney. You have all these individuals that are there at all times of the day and night, and I'm not sure who's there. And I only got my one gun, and I got my buddy Sean that I got to look after. And the 13-foot trailer is in the back, and it's broad daylight. It's broad daylight. We get out of the car, and we start walking up there. And as we're walking up there, we hit the compound. And the compound from the front is just a big chain link fence in a mobile home in the middle of the compound. And there's a bunch of trees that kind of seclude it a little bit, and it's kind of camouflaged a little bit like that. But it's a chain link fence that is locked at all times. It's locked at all times, and usually the process of getting inside this compound is you go up to the fence, and they'll see you on surveillance, and they're going to come out with their guns, and they're going to approve and give permission, and they'll let you in personally. That's the way it usually goes, okay? But as we're approaching this fence, my buddy Sean tells me, what are we going to do? I tell him, come on, we're going to hop this fence. We're going to hop this fence. And he's like, bro, I don't think this is such a good idea. I say, bro, none of this is a good idea, but let's go. I have my gun out. The firearm is out in the open, and you can see it, and it's shining. So they're definitely going to notice that I have a pistol.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Over it,
You have 60 seconds remaining.
John Doe was staying in. Hey, did it say 60 minutes? 60 seconds. As we hop this fence, I see the 13-foot trailer right there in the back. That's right there where John Doe is supposed to be. That's right there where the meth is supposed to be. That's right there where the money is supposed to be. And as I'm walking towards there, they 100% see us because Pusher comes out of the compound. He comes out of the compound, he comes out of the mobile home, and I pop off a couple of shots. Boom, boom. And he immediately goes back inside. He goes back inside, and I tell Sean that we ain't got much time. So we run to that 13-foot trailer, and we just start ripping the door off. I rip the door off. I'm inside the trailer, and Sean is panicking. Sean is definitely panicking, and I'm grabbing whatever I can because I don't see John Doe, I don't see the money, and I don't see the. But what I do see is I see a bunch of things that are valuable, that are worth taking, and I'm going to take it. So I took a 50 caliber Turkish Mauser rifle. I took his cell phone. I took he had a little bomb. It was a righteous bomb. It was a little, one of those remote control cars that was turned into a bomb. He turned it into an explosive device, that he really, really valued, and he loved it. And I knew this firsthand because I've been there a few times, not at this place, but I'd been there when he was building this little remote control bomb. So I knew that he really loved this thing, so I knew I had to take that. I took that. I took everything that I possibly could. I threw it in a duffel bag, and we head out. As we start heading out, I see the comrades right there from Kenai. They're starting to pile out of that mobile home. I pull out that 9mm Beretta one more time, and I start waving it towards them, but not at them, but towards them. I tell them, bro, it's in your best interest to kick back. Tell John Doe I got his stuff, and to give me a call. I got his phone. We're going to be waiting for him. And he's like, bro, and I pop off a couple shots just to let them know I'm not playing. Boom, boom. And they go back into the mobile home, and then you can hear them yelling and screaming, contemplating whether or not they should come out and start just unloading SKSs. Because let me tell you something. As I'm telling this story. They did not, start shooting back for any other particular reason. Probably then it would have been a fatality because they had the weapons and they had the ammunition to take me down in a second right there. And I know this. And this is all the older homeboys from IE Death Squad inside this house. Now, they must have noticed that I was a youngster or something, and that's the reason they didn't do it, or maybe it had nothing to do with them. I don't know. But we hopped the fence, and remember I had told that girl who drove the car, I told her if she heard gunshots to flee from the scene. So as we're running down the street, I'm already assuming that she left us. But as I get a little bit closer, I noticed that she's still there waiting for us. And I was like, wow. So we hop into her car, and we take off, and we go back to my homeboy's mom's house. And we go back there with all these things, and she says, well, what do we do now? I said, we sit here, and we wait for John Doe to call this cell phone, and we're going to get you your stuff back. Sure enough, maybe about 30 minutes later, that cell phone rings. And I pick it up. I say hello, and he's cussing. He's yelling and screaming. He's like, you mother effer, I want all my stuff back. I say, hey, bro, kick back, bro. It's powder. And he immediately stops, and he says, what? He said, what are you doing? I said, bro, you robbed the wrong people, bro. You robbed the wrong people, bro. He said, yeah, but you just ran up on the wrong people, too. And the homeboys and the comrades are pissed, bro. You just ruined their trailer, and they want to talk to you. I said, well, check this out, bro. First things first, you need to come. I'm going to have my girlfriend come pick you up, bro. And you're going to sit in the passenger side, bro, and you're going to bring the money and the stuff, and I'll give you your stuff back, but I'm going to sit in the back seat. And he didn't want to. Reluctantly, he did not want to, but they showed up. And I'm waiting for them to pull up. I'm waiting for my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my co-defendant in this case. And she, was a few years older than me. My co-defendant.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
She was a couple years older than me. She was an ex-stripper, and she kind of taught me things that I didn't know at the time. She, in other words, she turned me out and introduced me to a whole other scene that I wasn't used to. So I get the call on the cell phone that she's pulling up. She's pulling up, and she has John Doe in the car, and he's in the passenger seat like I asked. The reason why I had him in the passenger seat is because I didn't want him to be, I wanted to be behind him inside the car. I didn't want him to be behind me inside the car, just in case anything was to happen. So I see him pull up. Sure as hell, I notice that he is in the passenger seat, and I go out there. And when I go out there, I tell him, I said, there better not be any type of firearms in your hands, bro. If there are, just keep your hands up where I can see them, bro, because I'm not playing these games right now. There's a lot of distrust going on, and, everyone's high. You just never know what could happen in a second. So I go there, I sit behind him, and I get all the dope and most of the money back. So a lot of the money was sent. And when I did that, I gave him all of his stuff, and we talked for a little bit, and we went our separate ways. But what he told me is that I need to go meet up at one of the homeboys' compounds. He wants me to go over to Pusher's compound because one of the older homeboys from Peanut wants to sit down and talk to me. I told him, I said, well, who is it? And he said that I'll find out when I show up there. And they wanted me to be there around 8 o'clock. I told them, all right. I told them I was going to have my girlfriend take me. They said, that's fine. So I went there. It's 8 o'clock. I I mean, my homegirl's mom was so grateful that I got most of the money back and all of her dope back so that she could do her thing. She's set. And let me tell you something. If it wasn't for me, with this person, me getting it from John Doe, nobody would have, because this individual right here will shoot you in a second. That's why I don't want to say his name. This person will shoot you in a second, and he rolled with weapons too. He was rolling the same way as me, and it was just the way it happened. It's just the way it happened because it was supposed to happen that way, or else it could have turned ugly real quick. So it's about 8 o'clock, and I go sit down. We're on our way. We're driving up there, and they told me I'm not allowed to bring any weapons. I'm not allowed to bring any guns. So the whole time I'm tripping. I'm thinking, is this going to be a setup? I'm going to sit down with public enemy number one, whoever's speaking for them at the time out there in my area, with no weapons on me. And as we're driving over there, I can't even tell you how nervous I was. And one of my good friends who's in Donovan State Prison right now, his name's Jason Mahoney. He was my older homeboy at the time. They called him Knucklehead. He was my older homeboy that I looked up to, that I loved, that I still love. He's like one of my best friends, and I hope to see him soon. And as I go into this house, he's there. Brandon Hintz is there. Joe Mindy's there. Adam Mendioli's there. Dave Messina's there. Ryan Romero's there. All the homeboys from IE Peni are there. And I sit down, and there was an individual that came up who did all the talking. And his name was Crackers. Crackers from Peni. He's been out of the, prison. He's been doing it. He's been out of prison for a very long time because he's been doing the family thing. And he sat me down, and I remember, because I've been hearing about this gang. I'm hearing a lot about this gang, but I've never been among them until right then and there. And every single one of them was big, tattooed down from head to toe. And they were all just crazy looking, every single one of them. And they sat me down, and he comes up and he tells me, he says, "So you're Powder?" I said, "Yeah." And he tells me, he says, "I'm going to only tell you this one time and one time only. Peni runs this area. You don't. You're going to do what we tell you to do, or I know where you live. We know where all your relatives stay, and we're coming. If you don't follow these orders, we're coming." They said, "You need to stop everything that you're doing. You answer to us now." And basically, they just put it down. They laid down the law. And I remember looking into this dude's eyes and how real it was, and how it felt to be in front of a real notorious gang. And right then and there, that was my very first introduction. And they were not playing. These dudes were, boots and braces, Chuck Taylors, guns, drugs out. I mean, they could have wasted me. And these were the big dogs. And eventually, I ended up becoming one of them. I ended up becoming a member of them. And that dude, Crackers, man, he's been out there, in the IE, kind of, the game's different now. Everything's different now. People are trying to change, and people are trying to live the family life now. But at that time, he was at his best. He was at his best. And he sat me down, and he told me that. And I'll never forget the look in his eyes. And I'll never forget, how grateful I was probably for that talk right there, too, because I was on a real path of self-destruction. And, that it actually sunk into me that I couldn't just do what I wanted right there. You can't just go around ripping people's, trailer doors off and shooting gunshots in the middle of the daytime without repercussions. So, this story, it meant a lot to me because this was my very first introduction and my very first sit-down talk with one of the main gangs in the state of California for white supremacy. Thank you, and I hope that, people understood, it can relate to this story, and it sinks in too, because this was the moment that I connected right here with one of the main dudes and from my area, and I was actually not asked. I was told to do something for the first time in my life, and thank you for listening to my story.